Okay, we better get moving. We've actually got a lot to get in this session. Usually we do this in about an hour and a half, so we're going to be talking very quickly and jumping about a little bit. So hopefully you'll enjoy the session. If there are any questions as we go, please feel free to ask them. What we might do is repeat them, or if it's going to take too long, we'll come back to them at the end, if that's okay with everybody, because I'm sure other people in the room are going to have questions, but we really want to get through the content, if that's okay. My name's Leon Booth. I'm one of the sales strategy managers at Microsoft around desktop virtualization. I'm actually very excited to be here today talking to all of you guys. I'm actually working with Nathan Strong and Peter from HP to actually talk to you about a solution that HP have built and put together here in Australia. So this is actually an Australian developed solution. Nathan is the lead architect on it, so he can actually answer a lot of the questions around this, and you can spend some time, if you're interested in going deeper with the solution, with the guys down on their stand. But I think it's very prevalent, and looking at the room today how full this is. How many people today are just looking at what is our desktop strategy moving forward? How do we define what is our next generation of desktops? Yeah, quite a number of people. I think we're at that perfect storm here in Australia when we're looking at that. We're seeing the mix of the end of life of Windows XP. Anyone know how many days we've got left before we need to be off? You've got 950 and counting on there. We've also seen a lot of change in the IT industry, the consumerization of IT, the changes in the things we're expected to deliver as an IT department. So when we actually look at why this solution and why is this quite important, what we've actually got and what we've put together here to build this solution are the three key leading vendors in the desktop space. Obviously, Microsoft, we are the desktop. You know, we are the operating system. What you've seen over the past couple of years is our partnership with Citrix growing a whole lot stronger. And our partnership with Citrix really is around desktop virtualization and the changes that virtualization, application virtualization, desktop virtualization, user virtualization really bring, and how we can actually pull together these technologies to deliver the next generation desktop. And then in HP, we have our number one hardware partner in terms of supplying the servers and the desktops, but also from a management of infrastructure people. HP have more desktops under management than any of our other partners. So what you can actually see here is a very strong consortium of three key vendors around the desktop. So with that, I'll actually hand over to Nathan Strong to take you through the solution.
Thanks, Leon. So I'll skip over the agenda pretty quickly, but I'm going to start at level 100. I know it's about 5 minutes there, but I need to get a few key messages through to everyone, and then we'll dive a bit deeper and we'll deeper together before we come back to service. So, old world system. That's what I call the way we used to do it. That's the way you do it now. Corporately owned desktops So as things change, like microphones, we need to adapt. So it needs to be scalable. It needs to be able to scale out when we scale out. It needs to be enterprise-wide, it needs to be manageable, all those things that we expect in IT, we need to cater for them. It's a platform to assign users different things quickly. They need to be able to, look, I'm asking for a resource. Why is it taking me 2 months to get this resource? I want it now. I don't want to have to wait. And they can consume, but it needs, for us, it needs to be secure and it needs to be structured. We cannot handle all of these devices, all of this consumerism to affect the way that we manage IT. It needs to be very structured. How do we do that? So we define an access platform, and this is something that's going to be foreign to pretty much everyone in the room, right? So access platform, what does that give us? That gives us an ability to consume now. So think of environment A up here as where everyone is today. This is my world. All the apps, all the services, all the desktop I provide are in that world. I've defined a boundary around that world, stops the baddies from getting in. I've defined all of these things over time around environment A. We're stepping back from that. We're saying we are going to consume from environment A. And that may be our primary source of consumption, particularly to start with. So VDI, server-based computing, application, web-based services, all those sort of things that exist perhaps in environment A at the moment, we will consume, but we will consume from our access platform. So what are we getting by doing this? Well, there's environment B. So let's think of environment B as all the other things that you have. Dev, test, partner organisations. These are all the things that we have troubles managing now because they're in a little enclave and I've got this PC down the end of the corridor with its own network printer that I maintain once every 2 years and I need to do testing on it. It doesn't work, all those sort of things. Well, let's just consume it from the same platform. So that's my developer environment. Well, why can't my developers consume all production stuff? Then have their own little development enclave, manage that, do all the little key stuff, that's okay. That can be environment B or C or whatever. This pink one over here, very sexy pink. These are all the things that you want to do. These are all your dreams. These are the things the next 3 to 5 years that you will be consuming. That may be cloud. That may be a merger or acquisition in your organisation. That may be a managed service that you take up. Maybe video conferencing servicing. Why can't I have that as another consumption resource domain, right? So now I've got this platform for consumption. Where do we go from there? So Peter, who's my professional driver over here, the Stig, will introduce you to our CVAS interface. So what is this? This is a platform for consumption. The technology in the back end, I don't care. I'm Gen Y now, apparently. I'm going to click on that button and I'm going to get something. I don't care what IT did behind it, I'm going to get it. So you can see here, there's a few things like the presentation we're running is an app. We can move and scale tiles. We can sort them. I'm going to grab my little cheat sheet so I know what Peter's doing. So they're presented with this tile-based interface, and this is very dynamic, and it's really hard to demonstrate on a laptop with all the VMs we have going on, and we're limited by a 5400 RPM disk and all that sort of stuff, but we'll show you the capability, right? So this is what a user will see every time. Every time they come in and want to consume something from one of those resource domains, this is what they see. Have the ability to do all these funky things. A tile is really whatever you want it to be. It can be an app, a web service, cloud, internal, external, managed by you, managed by someone else. So we're not limited by what we put behind that. Okay, so the interface. Down the bottom is a widget bar. You see my gooky Twitter photo over here, but the widget bar is really extensible. This is for corporate consumption of information. So think of it as your Windows sidebar, but for corporate IT. It's not necessarily internet facing. It can be just corporate facing if that's what you want. RSS feeds. All of these widgets are out of the box, right? So, you know, your normal console handling sort of sessions, last log on, there's some security stuff, there's, you know, integrated with AD pictures as you see over here. This is really interesting. This is scenario-based security. So I don't know whether resolution allows you to see this here, but what we have is really a matrix. And it said, when I logged in, it evaluated who I was, what account I used, it evaluated what machine I was on, and what location I was in. And that's really important. It said, well, I know you and I know that machine, but I think you're somewhere else. I'm at Macca's, right? So potentially, depending on that, I will get a resultant set of security, scenario security, right? So at Macca's, I may not get the privileged information that I get at work. Sensitive corporate data won't be available to me. So as I log in, it evaluates that and gives me this and assigns me the relevant tiles that I have access to in that scenario. So if any one of those security things change, I take my laptop back to work from Macca's now, this will change. I will get a different set of tiles and I'll be able to consume that sensitive data. So really, really cool. So other things for the widget bar. Integrates with things like service management tools. It's a .NET WPF API, so you just program it to it. So for customers, we've done lookups of like alert levels for that site. For instance, we do traffic warnings, things like that through RSS feeds, corporately published information about the director and his mistress, all that sort of stuff we can publish through here. Very, very extensible. So service requests. So I request a new resource. Click on it, follows a workflow. If it's automatically approved, the resource will show up. All that sort of stuff's functional. So just think of that as very extensible, open to your imagination. So tiles, also we can launch full screen, part screen, multiple monitors. We can handle all those freaky situations that you have in IT. So the resolution's pretty cool. We'll just launch a desktop. So we use Desktop 5, for instance. So this is all running on my laptop. Excuse the slowness probably. So what just happened here? So I decided to consume a resource. I clicked on it. Regardless of technology, it got me that resource. For instance, here it's using Desktop 5. Win 7, 64, standard sort of VM that you would expect. This is my corporate desktop, for instance. So I'm going to launch a couple of apps now. So everything's app V. So V or XenApp or whatever you're required to stream into this desktop. The whole premise of what we do here is that nothing is installed in this VM if possible. We have as many stateless VMs as we can. So we stream in high-def video, whatever we need, right? So the ability to consume resources now is in that VM. Now consuming AppV, XenApp, other centralized computing or streaming technologies. We just consume them again. So you can see I'm running a whole bunch of stuff, right? Multiple videos, Office, a little bit of work, a little bit of play, obviously. The bit of YouTube, we could have kept that going probably. So we'll go back to the home screen. So a lot of capability here. So that's just a desktop, that's just one. So now I'm a developer on this side, I need to get into my other desktop, my development desktop. This is where I launch all my dev tools from. This is where I have Visual Studio and all those cool things. So sorry, the resolution is different to what it was on my laptop when we tested this before. So the ability now to consume inside dev. Same sorts of resources. I have to switch between them. I can continuously do that forward and back. The ability to run Photoshop, for instance, larger applications and things like that. So this developer, at the moment, sits on his gooky little laptop or desktop over here that's really high spec and whatever, and then he's got his production stuff that he has to check his corporate email on. But he'd rather spend all his life over here on this really cool piece of hardware. Well, now, it doesn't matter. He gets all the same corporate tools as everyone else, gets his corporate email, gets centralized service, managed services, all those sorts of things, but he also gets his dev. So then he also gets his tests. So one of our customers got 6 or 7 environments. By the time you've developed it to when it gets to production, they've got to go through 6 or 7 of those. That is a massive pain. So from here, they can follow it all the way through, have them open, say, well, why is that one not working and this one is? They can follow the test cycle all the way through. So maybe we'll switch back again, Pete. So we've got a couple open here. Maybe we'll sort by connection state maybe now. So again, we'll launch into something else. So these can be apps, like my presentation, for instance, was just a seamless app. running in presentation mode. So, seamless apps, desktops. What are we launching now? Another desktop, I think. Okay, local video. So we can also run local applications underneath the desktop. So why would you want this? So I've just created this nice environment, whatever. I've got a mobile user. I've got a user in a hospital, for instance, we had, where they've got a Siemens medical imaging computer, which is essentially tied to this big box that scans you in all sorts of ways. Only supported on XP. They wanted to roll everyone to Windows 7, but they couldn't roll this thing because it was only supported on XP. Well, what do? We just put our shell in front of XP. Looks like they got everything else from corporate IT. They can consume all their new resources, but they click on the medical imaging thing, it runs in XP underneath. Gives them that same functionality with local apps. So now I've got local apps, remote desktops, just consuming. So go back. This is a secure desktop. So maybe I have in my organisation some data that's more sensitive than others. Maybe it's in a little enclave or a managed enclave maybe by one of our telcos or something like that. Maybe it's sensitive because it holds all of our financial data for our organisation. Maybe I'm a security organisation and I have to separate and segregate data from each other. That's simple now. We maintain that backend environment in a secure enclave, in the secure environment it needs to be, and we consume it. So separate SSL VPNs, run to those, isolated from each other. You have the ability to switch between them, like Peter's doing now. So it's all dynamic. It's all user-centric. I can click on the button and it goes somewhere and gets it. So if you've changed your mind in IT and you've decided, I'm going from this hypervisor to that hypervisor to this centralized computing technology to that one, the user doesn't care. When we go from Win 7 to Win 8, all that changed is something behind that button changed. The user consumed it and they're using Windows 8. So let me give you an example from a training point of view. So let's say Microsoft released Office 2010 and it's got this fantastic ribbon. And all my users are going, I can't use this thing. What's this ribbon thing? I need to train all my users. It's a hypothetical situation, of course. Why don't I just ring up Microsoft, go, look, I want a month's training, 1,000 users in the cloud. No probs. Let's do it. You rent it for a month, comes up as a tile, publish an RSS feed. Office 2010 training is available for 1 month. Send out a reminder in a couple of weeks. Here's your training. Will consume. So now you have the ability to dip your finger in the cloud a little bit. Oh, I want a little bit of that, please. Oh, I want to do a little bit of compute over there too. So from a CIO point of view, they've got this cloud just smashing them day to day from every vendor, saying, you need some cloud, you need some cloud. For the CIO, he's going, how am I actually going to take advantage of that? How am I going to take advantage of this cool thing that's cheap over here? At the moment, it's really, really difficult for them to consume those services. Well, we're saying, do it a little bit at a time. Have a go at it. See what you like. See what vendors you like. See what services are appropriate for it. Have a go at it. Do it to a limited group. Rent it per month, per day, whatever you want. Very, very simple, and we can adapt to that. So go back to the present. I'll dive a little bit deeper. So that's sort of the user-centric sort of stuff, right? What I'll go into now is how we would run this. So we need some components to run this, obviously, right? What you see here, it's with a hypervisor. It's Hyper-V R2 SP1 on my laptop. Server 2008 R2 for the RDS servers and the Zen Desktop delivery controller, Win 7 VMs. We have Netscale, SSL VPN, access gateways. We can do with those, we can do load balancing or potentially acceleration of your sessions. We need different types of authentication. So every time I click on one of those buttons, for ease of the demonstration, I've done pass-through. But we can do Windows authentication, smart card, two-factor. So if each of them have to be different because IT security dictates that, that's okay. We can handle that. We need to be able to secure our systems. So the scenario security, the ability to consume dynamically in different security scenarios is there. And we need to be able to absorb all of these cool presentation methods that we have now. So cloud, virtual desktops, server-based computing, web-based, all that sort of stuff. And we need to be able to manage it. So SCVMM, SCCM, you still need those things. SCOM. So I'm not going to delve into how to design those because we're saying go to the internet, download the reference architecture, start from there. We don't want to bastardize anything. What happens? I show up at any machine in my organisation, or I come in off a remote computing, analyses who I am, who have I logged in as, what device have I logged in as, is it known or unknown, and what location am I coming from? Am I in the building with my desktop as me? That's great. If I'm not, the scenario will change. And I get provisioned an appropriate set of resources for me in that scenario. It's dynamic, we can move, size, sort, all those sort of cool things that I showed you, that Peter showed you in the interface. And then we just started to consume resources. We just went and got a Zen app session. We went and got a Zen desktop session. We streamed some apps in from Zen app and from AppV. We can do web-based apps, and we can do VM-hosted apps or Zen app 5 for legacy stuff. We can get around the 16-bit VB6, IE6, terminal emulator, all those things. Everyone goes, Windows 7, it's going to be a problem. How are we going to handle it? This is a really, really cool way to do it. We have the ability to consume from one environment, 2 environments, 3 environments, 100. It doesn't matter. Just start to consume is the message. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper now into the modularity of it. So in the data center, how am I going to scale this thing out? I've got a reference architecture over there for 1,000 users. Well, you can come to the session in the morning and with Citrix and Microsoft and HP and see that as well. But from there, where do I go? I've got maybe 30,000 users. How am I going to scale this? It's all about modularity. And this is what I'll dive into a little bit now. So why modularity? We need to get to a scenario where we have a known compute block, essentially. It's a known cost, it's a known performance, and I can expand that as required up and down for my organisation. So let's use an example. I have to provide, in a large enterprise, 40,000 concurrent sessions. How am I going to do that? First of all, you'd be the first one in the world to do it, as far as we know. Beyond that, how am I going to do it? So I'm going to go, I need to figure out what my base block is for a building block for users. I also need to figure out what my lowest common denominator is from a service point of view in the data center. So let's look at a few components that we would have in a data center. So we're going to have some directory services. So Active Directory, not going to probably get outscaled in this environment with that many users. So I'm going to chuck that into an infrastructure block. I'm going to look at SCCM central site, not going to get scaled out by this device, by this scenario. I'm going to throw that into the infrastructure block. There will be other services, edge site for instance, maybe for endpoint monitoring, other things like SCOM perhaps as your RMS, and those sort of things will go into an infrastructure block. Then I've got this other block, and the other block we'll call the user compute block. User block. I'm going to say my end user block is going to have everything in it that I need to present stuff to users quickly. So yes, there's some AD, there's some management, that sort of stuff. That will be in the infrastructure block. There'll be one of them per data center. From there, where am I going to go? I'm going to say, well, each user block is a known quantity, and it's 2,500 users. And that's going to give me Zen app and Zen desktop desktops. It's going to give me a little bit of play here and there within those numbers. But what is a block for me? Well, a block is a chassis. I'm saying it's a HP C7000 chassis full of BL465s, right? So that is just my standard block. Now, I can have different variants of that. I might say, well, I need a block that's going to be able to cater for my GIS users. I can give them high IOPS, I can give them Tesla cards in servers, I can give them all sorts of stuff, and that can be a different reference block, but I've got to separate them into blocks so that I can expand if required. Again, to separate those roles that aren't constrained in that data center. So I may have many data centers, but I need to focus on modularity to be able to make the data centers the same, scale up as I go. I might have a block for me, it might be a server. If I'm a small enterprise, a user block might be a server. And I can expand that block because it's known performance, known cost, no benefits, right? So I need to be able to get to this stage to do it. So do the work up front is what I'm saying. So get to my new data center, how am I going to do it? I'm going to put in one infrastructure block. That's my core services, each data center. And then I'm going to put in a user block. And I'm going to expand that as required. So the pilot starts back here. And then we go, well, we're going to do an extended pilot. And then we're going to do everyone. Right? And it may end up a row of racks full of stuff. It may end up for you, you end up with a chassis full after your block was one. So I'll pass back to Leon for a minute now, but there's a lot of concepts in there that I think everyone needs to probably grasp. There's a lot of technology underneath it, but again, the main premise of all of that is that we accept what is there now as accepted. We use reference architectures from the vendors, and we implement. We're not saying customize it in any particular way, it's just use it as it is. I think from there, you have the capability to really implement into this consumption platform as you change. So as the business asks you for something, you now can analyse what is in the market right now, what is the best cost point for the functionality that I've been asked to do, and how can I provide that to the business. So I'll pass back to Leon. Cheers, mate.
What becomes quite interesting. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. What becomes quite interesting with this architecture, this module, when we're talking to customers about it, is what's new? You know, how's it going to be work? Are we going to be the first to do it? Because it's actually built around the reference architectures and products that you use today. A lot of these technological capabilities, you already have the skills for today. You're leveraging SCCM to manage your environments. You've got Windows desktops. You've got Windows servers. You're already managing storage. You're familiar with the HP technology. So in terms of driving anything forward and how this looks, it's not revolutionary. It's evolutionary. What this reference architecture does and this solution does is really pulls it together in a way that changes the way we use those technologies. That actually takes full advantage of the capabilities available in those technologies. And whenever we're talking to sort of customers around, you know, what is part of our next desktop strategy, the technology is going to be the easy piece. And so you just ring Nathan up, say, I want one of these, and he comes, he drops it in. What we've got to think about within our organizations are things like the process, the policies for the use of this technology. If we think about our ability to scale this technology out, make it available anywhere, for people to bring their own devices in and connect to these sort of things. And one of the things we've not shown today, when I've demoed with Nathan in the past, he had what was that device you used to make?
Thanks, Leon.
He used a touchpad, but this infrastructure can be accessed by things like iPads, Blackberries, as he's mentioned. It's not constrained by a PC and a Windows-based device as it was today. But we've got to think about the sort of policies. Things as simple as, you know, what if a user decides to work off a device this big every day? What are the implications for our organization, OH&S? What are the security policies in terms of the type of devices, the patch levels? When we bring things onto the network, where are we going to let them go, depending on the device? So there's a whole lot of policy and procedural things you'll need to think about. And then also, when we put these architectures together, particularly around virtualization, there's a lot more complexity for IT to manage. It's something that we're not going to get away from. If we look at what we're doing, we're trying to make this simpler with tools like SCCM, being able to manage across the various different delivery models. But in terms of the modern desktop, there is more complexity in IT. Automation is key. We need to look at automating. As Nathan's talked about, build these modular examples so we can actually repeat the processes. Because without this, we're going to end up with a whole lot more mess. But what we're really doing here, as you see, is taking away the user being the point of integration, them using different devices, them copying data, and actually putting that behind the scenes as IT. But there is cost and complexity with that. So heading into these sort of projects, that's something organizations need to recognize. I know a lot of the time in IT, we've been pushed. We've got a lower cost. We've got a lower cost. what we're actually doing with a lot of these solutions, and desktop virtualization in particular, there was a whole lot of hype over the years about it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be easier, it's magically going to fix all those problems we have today with the desktop. It's not. But what it does do is allow us to provide a whole lot of new capabilities for our organizations. So again, as we're looking at the sort of costing type models, it's about delivering new capabilities. If we just want to deliver the same as what we have today in the same way, these sort of ways of doing it are very expensive ways to do that. They're very good ways of delivering a whole lot more capability at a very, very cost-effective price. A couple of the technology pieces. I know Nathan gets a lot of questions. Apparently there are some other hypervisors about in the market that people do tend to use. But when we actually looked from the desktop side of things and when we did the investigation, we'll go a lot deeper in this tomorrow, but Hyper-V is a hypervisor that's optimized for the desktop. So Microsoft with Service Pack 1, we did a whole lot of work purely around making the Windows 7 desktop workload a prime workload that we wanted to run on Hyper-V. And the reason for this was when we were looking at what was going on in the virtualization space and hosted desktops, the big problem was around cost. How many desktops could we put onto a piece of hardware? And that became very, very important in bringing the cost models of desktop virtualization to be acceptable. With Hyper-V SP1, particularly the dynamic memory, I think there is a session tomorrow. I think it's 8:15 a.m. in the morning, so I'm not sure how many of us will be about for that. But the Microsoft, HP, and Citrix guys that have done their scalability testing are really going to drill into the results and look at and talk about how we were able to scale up very significantly. And the sort of numbers, 120 plus desktops on one blade now mean that from a cost point of view, desktop virtualization is very, very effective. And what we do know is there are still a lot of technologies emerging. So whether it's the disk subsystems, whether it's cards to accelerate I/O, this is a market that is now moving very quickly. So it's going to change, and the cost of these sort of is only going to drop in future. It's like anything in IT. The cost is only going to get easier. So for some scenarios where today things might not be cost effective, by building this architecture and putting them in place for the things that are, 6 months, a year down the line, there may be other areas that all of a sudden it becomes a whole lot more cost effective and a lot more viable for us to do this as part of that. And the other big focus, and in conjunction with the partnership with Citrix, it really is around the desktop experience should be the same whether I choose to run it locally, whether I choose to run it from a terminal server Zen app type server-based computing module, whether I decide to run a virtual desktop. In the past, that's not really been there. The server-based computing has always been the poor cousin. We could always tell the differences. How many people have tried to roll out server-based computing before and had users sort of complaining about performance and things like that? Yeah, a few nods going on around there. If we look at the innovation that's occurred in that market, the work Citrix have done with the protocols to enable that user experience, we're not there yet, but for a whole lot more users, we've enabled the scenario and an acceptable performance, the performance the same if or better than they get today, because they're going to be leveraging new technologies such as Windows 7 to be viable in those scenarios. But again, as we're looking at our projects around rolling out desktops, there's going to be no hard and fast rules within your organizations on this particular desktop or method delivery is going to work there, this one's going to work for these users. As we go, as we learn things, as we test it in our environments, we're going to be changing things. We're going to realize that, well, actually, we thought these users would consume it this way, but they want it this way. To the point of even users of the same classification, maybe the finance business group. One user may choose to consume their desktop this way because it works for them. Another user may want to consume it a different way or consume their applications a different way. What it's really about is, as IT, we've got to embrace that and leverage this infrastructure. And this is where the security and enablement pieces become very, very important, because without those, without the access control, without the device assessment, we can't enable these scenarios that our users are demanding from us today. With all the improvements as well, when we look at what Microsoft's doing, certainly in the hypervisor space, it's been recognized by Gartner in terms of the progress we made, what we've been able to deliver. We're now in the leaders quadrant, in the Gartner's quadrant there. And again, as Windows 8 Server comes, we've got the build conference in a couple of weeks, we'll see and talk about a whole lot more improvements that are going to occur within the hypervisor. And rest assured that, again, desktop virtualization is going to be a prime focus for Windows 8 and Windows Server 8 as part of that.
Thanks, buddy. So before we go to this slide, I'll just go back. Peter will just show you one more thing. So say I'm in a different business unit to that shared services organisation user. I'll just switch user. So what controlled that interface? The look and feel, the tiles, everything like that. Group policy, Active Directory. You maintain that already. The difference between that person and this person is the organisational unit that I'm in. Maybe. So the resolution's a bit stuffed up, obviously. But the ability to transform the look and feel, the way we do things, the way everything acts is all group policy and Active Directory. So different business units can have different look and feels. You can have a gold-plated one for the execs, and you can have a, whatever for the finance group. They can all have their own little good feeling, look and feel, and that's okay. So we'll switch back, Pete. We'll go back to the presentation. I'll just go through the main benefits. So I think the one that I'll highlight first, it's a component-based architecture. So those blocks that you see before, they're going to stay. The things that go in those blocks, those building blocks, is up to you. If you choose HP, Citrix and Microsoft, great. If you choose a management technology you have already, that you want to leverage that existing investment, that's okay. If you want to leverage existing investment of thick clients, great. If you want to go thin clients, HP thin clients, even better. That's okay too. Where are we here? Yep. That's great too. It's the sum of COTS products. So we're not saying go and buy something that's bespoke here. Don't go and do something yourselves and hack it up and do whatever. Go to the internet, download the reference architecture, buy the software and implement it. It's a lot harder than that on the ground, I know, but you've got a good place to start. The work's been done. Commercial organisations put in a lot of effort to do it that way. Why don't you leverage it? Avoid rip and replace, as I said before. Centralised desktop computing. So you tell me how, in your current distributed computing way, you're going to maintain things for the next 5 years on the proliferation of end-user devices, bring your own computer, all those sort of things. How are you going to manage that in a distributed computing environment? It's going to be very, very difficult and very expensive. What we're saying is, to some level, you're going to have to centralise your IT. Now, if that's just I centralise a desktop and I remote into it and I access it, great. If that's, you're going to take it to the next level and virtualise everything and centralise it in the data centre, have some hosted, some managed, some yours, some something, that's okay. Just consume it. Compatible, as I said before, IE6, VB6, all those problems that we have at the moment. Consume them from a capability that can provide that to you. Xenat 5, fantastic platform for IE6. VB and terminal emulators, what VM hosted? Just VMs. Consume those. OCS and Link, virtualization, integration with your partners, interesting one. So HP buys a company every 2 weeks. So mergers and acquisitions in this day and age are a reality. We need a capability to be able to consume resources from that new entity and for them to consume resources from our corporate shared services. And we can do that quickly through this mechanism. We can just give them the interface, give them access, provide them access day one, they're up and running. Rapid migration to Windows 7, that can be Windows 7, that can be Windows 8, that can be Office 2020, whatever it may be. Cloud integration, dip your finger in, have a go. Do it as a little bit at a time. Have one service. Maybe training. I'm just going to do computer-based training as a service. CIO value proposition. It's all about reducing costs. It's about looking good for him. He's only there for 3 to 5 years at most. Usually does nothing for the first 3.5 years. So when you get that rush, I need to deliver something.
you've got this platform in place, you can deliver a lot of functionality very quickly. And it makes him look good, which makes you look good, and everything's good. Lowers risk. So again, it's COTS products in a reference architecture and increased user satisfaction. So you wrap all that up, the CIO gets all this messaging from vendors, he can take on the bits he wants to take on. IT can say, yeah, I don't think that's going to work, boss. I'd rather just use this little thing over here. Doesn't really matter. For the user, click on that button, it goes somewhere and gets it. If I get my phone and I click on a button and it doesn't go somewhere, I'd be incredibly disappointed now. As a user, if I click on a button in corporate IT, I expect the same. Simple as that. Again, I'll leave you with this statement. So, enterprise-wide, platform for consumption of resources in a secure and structured way. Really, really important that you get, this isn't the old way of doing it. This isn't distributed computing. I have a PC on my desk. That's the way it's always going to be. I'm going to rock up to work. I'm going to do my day job, and then I'm going to go home. The expectation is I can work on the train. I can work on the plane. I can use centralized computing, local computing, resources wherever they may be. But IT has the capacity to manage all that in a very consistent way through proven technologies from the vendors implemented in a standard way. Thank you very much for coming to listen to us.
We've got a few minutes left if there are any questions.
Happy to take questions and afterwards as well.
No, everyone's stunned silence. It was that good. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Mr. Cox.